Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to touch base with you about our watercolor class. First of all, you guys did such amazing work this term, and I was so impressed. So I thought in this lesson we could focus on a little bit more of technique. I know one thing that a lot of people, and even like myself, sometimes I got way too much water on the page. So I'm going to show you a really cool technique to be able to go in and suck that water up with the dry brush. And there's just some different techniques. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And I also wanted to kind of go back in. I know the first term we touched on Georgia O'Keeffe. She was an American woman artist. So I was going to kind of revisit that a little bit. And then in the end, we'll do a little bit of flowers. It'll be a little different than the flower painting that we did before. We won't be doing as much outlining with our pencil. We're just going to get the paint on the paper, and then we're going to do some layering. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So I wanted to, let me share the screen with you. So just a quick overview on Georgia O'Keeffe to refresh our memory. She was an amazing artist. And I really love her use of color was amazing. And so she said, I found I could say things with color and shapes that I couldn't say any other way. Things I had no words for. She used just amazing color in her work. Here's an example of one of her paintings. You can see, even though it's white, she's got so many other intricate colors in there. There's like some teal and some yellow. It's just really beautiful. When you take a flower in your hand and really look at it, it's your world for the moment. I want to give that world to someone else. Most people in the city rush around, so they have no time to look at a flower. I want them to see it whether they want to or not. That was just such a great, powerful. She's just looking at the flower, like really specifically. It's a great statement. So she also painted poppies. Just with really beautiful color, and that's kind of what we're going to get into today in this lesson. We're going to do some layering of color. So here's a poppy, and this is a yellow orchid. Just use really beautiful techniques here. A white flower on red. It's kind of similar to the one that we did in class. We had like the background was kind of one color, and then the flower was another, so it really stood out. She also did this is a petunia, another really beautiful example. And this just looked like a lot of fun. This is just a little cartoon that I threw in. The bee's looking at the flower in the museum. He's thinking, hey, why can't I reach that flower? And she says, I often painted fragments of things because it seemed to make my statements as well as or better than the whole could, right? So she really focused in on that one fragment, one piece of thing, one piece of a flower, or on one thing. Here's a red canna. This was a jack in the pulpit. Just some really beautiful layering. Hang on, I'm going to hit stop share. I'm going to go to another. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do a lot of, a little bit of practice with layering colors. It's going to be. Hi, welcome back. I was just pulling up another slide for us. And also a little bit of background on Georgia O'Keeffe. She was born in Wisconsin in 1887. Then she moved to New York, and she painted big flowers, as we talked about, from close up. Then she was sent to Hawaii to paint a pineapple, but she still preferred to paint flowers, so that was like her favorite medium. And then she died in New Mexico in 1986, so she lived a long time. And I actually have a picture of her. So this is her in the Southwest. She's older here. And she says, nobody sees a flower really. It is so small. We haven't time. And to see takes time. Like to have a friend takes time. I thought that was a great statement. This is another example of some painting she did in the Southwest with there's a desert. It's just, but she also, it's still, even in this desolate landscape, she included some flowers. Here's a picture of her in 1915. It says, while teaching at Columbia College, she began a sense of abstract charcoal drawings and was one of the first American artists to practice pure abstraction. And okay, so this brings us to kind of what we're gonna do today. I wanted to go through some of these watercolor techniques. There's wet on wet. This technique is done by wetting the paper with a brush and adding wet paint over it. I think we did some of this in class. We use this technique for washes and backgrounds, sunsets and water, and much more. We definitely use that technique for when we did some of our backgrounds. And we also use the wet on dry technique. I don't know if you remember, but we definitely did that with the lighthouse. And we did that with some of the flowers with the Vincent van Gogh paintings. So we went back and we added some detail, right, by applying that wet brush to dry paper. And we use this technique to add detail to paintings. It can be used over washes or by itself. Anything that needs a little more detail can be done by using this technique. And then today, what I wanted to get into is called softening an edge. So this technique is done when we create a line with paint that is too dark or harsh. And then when this happens, you can simply re-wet your brush and tickle the edge of the line, softening it and blending it to the rest of your painting. So we're gonna kind of do actually a combination between these two techniques. So we're gonna do, it's kind of like wet on dry, but it's also, we're gonna soften the edge because we're not gonna necessarily use our pencil to outline it, but we're gonna soften the edge with another brush. Okay, so here's an example of the flower, and see how it's got those beautiful layers. So this is the layered petals watercolor painting technique, and it's really a great one. So we're going to start out again, so she's not using, get rid of the marks, she's not using a line. She didn't draw out the flower, but she used her brush to do it in one color. Then as you keep going, you're going to add to that. So you're going to add another petal. And at this point, I know you can't see it from the picture, but I will demonstrate it. You're going to take a brush that's dry. So you're going to paint on that, you're going to paint on the leaf with one brush. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but we're going to just do a petal, one petal of the flower. And then you're going to go back with a dry brush and absorb some of that water. That's a really great technique. And what happens when you absorb the water, it gets lighter. See how in this one, this picture, it's dark. There's a lot of water on our paper. But when you go back and add the brush that's dry, you're picking up some of that water. So you're not only getting rid of the extra water, you're creating this light, beautiful, sheer color right here. That's a little different, and that's going to work really well when we start layering our flowers. And we'll continue to add to that. And then look at this one on the left. See how light and airy that is? You can almost see through it. It's very beautiful. And again, it's just using, we'll also use our dry brush, but we'll also use like a paper towel to dab our brush. Okay, so it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited. Okay, so it's a little different because it's hard for me to kind of hold it up, but do you see how I started the petal? So I went ahead and again, I started the petal, it's very wet, okay? So now, see it's kind of even dripping here on the bottom. So I'm gonna take my brush, actually, you can use the same brush and dab it with paper towel, or you can just pick another dry brush, okay? I'm gonna go in and lift up a lot of that extra paint. See how it's really coming off. And I'm going to dab it on a paper towel. I'm going to continue to kind of go in and look at that beautiful wash that's coming up. So you're really just seeing, and just kind of go slow. You can turn your brush over. So you've got a much different petal than what you started with. That color is just super, super light. voila. So started off with a darker red, but when I actually went back over it with my dry brush, I've got a beautiful kind of translucent color, but my edges are still really outlined. So again, I'm mixing my color. I'm coming back in to do another petal. And I've got a lot of water on my brush, right? Because with watercolor, we really want to take advantage of using a lot of water on our brush. I'm going to come in and I'm going to try to do another petal. We get some more color, some more water, going slowly here. Mine's going to run a little bit more because it's kind of slanted. So I'm going to put it down. I know it's hard to see, but I'm just creating another petal here. Okay. So now I'm going to come back in with a dry brush, and I'm going to really try to absorb a lot of that color right here. Right? Voila. And you don't have to get all of it, but if you really get the brunt of it, the bulk of the wetness off there, you're left with that sheer red, which is really, really beautiful. And that's kind of what we want. And also with this technique, you're taking a lot of the water off, so it's going to dry a lot quicker, which is really nice. And that'll really help us out when we get into the layering of the color. And also, I'm going to do this video in probably 2 parts, but don't be afraid when you're working at home to kind of take, and this, again, like I said, this will dry a lot quicker, but don't be afraid to kind of take a break and let your paint dry a little bit. Let your watercolor dry, take 10 or 15 minutes, and then come back to it. I know it takes a lot more patience, but you're really going to get that effect where once you start layering, where it's really going to pay off, okay? So I'll see you shortly in part 2.